Welcome back to Human Powered Podcast. I'm Jessica Becker, and I'm here with my good friend and now ongoing podcast host, Jen Rubin.
Hello.
We're in year 2, Jen.
I guess officially we are because it's 2026. Yeah.
Yeah. So today we're talking with someone that you and I have both worked with, and I think really enjoy working with because our missions are so aligned. We're talking with Maureen McCollum, who is the host and producer for a program of Wisconsin Public Radio called Wisconsin Life.
Yeah. And, one of the things we're doing with this podcast is we really want to be in conversation with people who are doing humanities work in their communities, that are using the humanities, whether it's through storytelling or whether it's through a variety of other things, to strengthen our democracy. And I feel like Maureen does that so well. And so it's going to be really interesting to talk with her about what she's actually doing and how she feels about doing that work right now in this particular moment in our country.
Yeah, we've had the opportunity to be a part of the evolution of Wisconsin Life since the beginning. Wisconsin Humanities has a relationship with Wisconsin Public Radio where, they actually came to us and said, hey, we've got this idea. And this was years ago. And I was like, yes, that's it. That's it. That's what the humanities does, is it shines a light in every corner of the state, in neighborhoods and communities, and says, what's happening here and what are people doing and what is this way that we can connect around different experiences. And that's what Wisconsin Life does. And that's what Maureen does so well. So I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. Well, hey, Maureen, it's so good to see you this morning. Thanks for joining us. We're excited to talk to you.
I'm so happy to be with both of you. I like you both a lot.
Yeah, this is going to be fun.
Yes.
Yeah. So just to orient us, you're in a big position here. You're the executive producer and director of Wisconsin Life at Wisconsin Public Radio. It's a great,
am.
yeah, you wield some storytelling power in our state.
I've never thought about it that way. But yes, I've been working on Wisconsin Life for about 8, 9 years now. At least as far as overseeing the project. Back when I was a reporter with Wisconsin Public Radio in La Crosse, I often did Wisconsin Life stories, and it was one of my favorite parts of the job. So it's been a real honor to be able to head this project and keep it going. So for people who don't know what Wisconsin Life is, it's stories about people, places, history, and culture of the state. We air 2 stories a week on WPR. It airs across the state. Stories can be kind of your classic radio feature with the reporter, nat sounds, interviews with people. We do essays from writers across the state, or just average people who have a personal story to share. We like to feature poets. We like to feature live storytelling events. Jen, you've been a big part of our of us doing that. And it's kind of like anything goes. It's just as long as the story gets to the heart of who we are as Wisconsinites, then we provide a platform for it. So it's a really lovely project. I adore it and I believe in it. And I'm just so happy to be working on it.
Yeah, I love Wisconsin Life. I mean, maybe a little later on, we could talk a little bit about the storytelling that we were able to collaborate on.
Mm-hmm.
But I will just say sort of anecdotally, I have a story that the Moth put on the Moth Radio Hour and on their podcast. And so when they did that a couple of years ago, whenever it was, I would hear from a few people, oh, I heard you on the radio. But then you played a couple of those Moth stories on Wisconsin Life. And so mine got played there. And I feel like everywhere I went, people are like, I heard you on the radio. So I feel like at least in Madison, I think more people are listening to Wisconsin Life than they are the national radio.
Oh, that's really nice. Thanks for sharing that. Did they ask about the leather jacket that you gifted your partner?
No, they did not.
Okay. That's what I'm curious about. So now everyone has to go back and hear Jen's story that aired on Wisconsin Life about her proposal with a leather jacket.
I think of it as the engagement ring leather jacket. Yes.
Yes,
So
that's great. Well, thanks for saying that. I appreciate it.
Yeah. What are some of your favorites that you feel like you get the most response and have really in some ways epitomized the mission and the idea behind Wisconsin Life?
Yeah, I think Some of my favorite stories I've done over the years have involved people who do things that they just really love. And so we're able to like provide a platform for people sharing their lives. So, like, one example I can think of is I don't know why this comes to mind right away, but during the pandemic, recording radio stories was a little strange because we had to keep our distance. People were masked. We were doing a lot of Zoom interviews. But needless to say, during the pandemic, I had come across this little girl in Milwaukee who was selling lemonade. So she was making lemonade, bottling it up, and like selling it off of her porch. And like people were making it a routine to go meet this little girl and to buy her lemonade and help support her. And so something as simple as creating like kind of an elevated lemonade stand, especially during that really dark time of the pandemic, it was like the summer of 2020. I think providing those glimpses of hope and light and levity are really, really important. Because we look at what's going on perhaps nationally and globally, and it can feel really, really heavy. But sharing these stories about what's going on with our neighbors, what's going on in the next county over, it's really important to remember that there are still a lot of good in the world, and there are still a lot of people who are just trying to make their lives and the lives of their neighbors like worth it,
Yeah.
I think too, I had so much fun working with you, Jessica, this summer on the flax story. And so people who aren't familiar with this, Jessica's dear friend, Leslie Schrader, has this mission to expand flax production across Wisconsin with the hopes of creating a linen industry here once again. I don't know if you want to fill people more in because you're more of the
No,
expert on
that's
it than I am.
man, you just summed that up beautifully. That's
Yeah, it's
it.
just like, but that was like such a wonderful story because I remember when you first told me about it, I was like, what? I didn't know that linen came from flax, first of all. Two, I didn't know that we in Wisconsin at one point had a flax and linen industry. And three, there's this woman who's so passionate about this idea that's not widespread, and she's trying to create this movement from like the ground up and literally in her own backyard. Like when you hear something like that and a story like that, it's so inspiring because you know that there's other people out there doing other little niche things that are just trying to make things better for people. And for someone like Leslie, I mean, I remember after that story aired, I had so many friends reach out to me because I have a lot of friends who like to work with textiles and whatnot. And they're like, what? This is amazing. I want to come in next year and go to the conference that she organized. And like, I want to try to do this too. And blah, 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 blah. So it's like when I get feedback about that, when I know that a story has perhaps changed someone's life, even if it's informed them, but maybe it gets them thinking about like, oh, maybe I should think about the clothing that I'm purchasing too. I mean, I remember after that story aired, I started thinking about my own like clothing consumption a little differently. I'd already been thinking about it a bit, but I was like, huh, maybe I do need to be paying more attention to these poly blends and whatnot. So I don't know. It's just the little stories that they provide a little glimpse of hope. They might be a little bit of entertainment, but maybe they spark a little bit of a change too. Those are the best stories.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of overlap in how you go about doing Wisconsin life stories and how Love Wisconsin did their stories. And I just want to like echo and build a little bit on what you said, because I think there's also a trick to like finding the right person doing that niche thing, because I mean, I sort of know this from listening to people tell stories that like people are sort of as engaged by what the story is about as how the person feels about telling the story. So
Hmm.
someone is just like super into their niche thing, like sort of is infectious and brings people along. And when I think about the stories you've done and what Love Wisconsin's done, which is sort of showing, yeah, that there's people in every corner of the state that like are digging in locally with this thing they're into and trying to bring people along with them. And I know, like, not to get sort of Pollyannish about it, but if like that was in our news feed, if we had like that dopamine rush, so we weren't just like, it's all terrible, it will never not be terrible, people are terrible, but if we had the opposite, which I think is what at least Love Wisconsin was able to do for a while when our Facebook algorithm was different than it is now, you know.
Right.
But but yeah, just sort of so I mean, I've been sort of thinking about like, well, what is the value of these kinds of stories we've worked hard to do and Wisconsin Humanities has worked hard to do in this just like overwhelmingly bleak moment. And so I hope you
Yeah.
have an answer, Maureen.
I don't know.
I
Well,
would
a
love an
couple
answer.
things came to mind. Like, I think that these stories really do help build community. And if, if it's something that just, not that you're necessarily hoping to call people to action, but maybe make connections, or even if they heard a story or like read a post from Love Wisconsin and said, and brought it up at dinner, talked about it with their family, talked about it with their friends. I think that that is like a really simple way to build community. I also think that perhaps reading these stories gives people hope in humanity, but also perhaps makes people feel like I'm not so alone. There are people out there who are trying to better themselves, or like take a risk too. Um, I think too, like what both Love Wisconsin and Wisconsin Life have done really, really well, and it's part of like my personal philosophy with the work that I do, is like we are sharing these stories to help people understand one another better. Like you might not agree, like you may be a person who's okay, like going back to linens, maybe there's someone who's like, no, I am 100% pro wool. That is all I will ever wear. But maybe they hear the story about linen and they're like, okay, I don't want to wear linen, but perhaps I understand why other people want to wear linen. Just like kind of creating that, hoping to create that understanding of what makes us different, why we're different, why it's beautiful to be different in the state. I think that that's something that both of our projects have done really well.
So I think the way like I tried to think about it, at least with Love Wisconsin, is like the stories are like building these bridges, right? Like, because it's pretty hard, it might be hard to get from where you are to somewhere else. And so like the stories can, in my optimistic days, I'm like the stories can sort of start building a bridge to that.
Oh, absolutely. And I also think, too, we're able to provide a platform for voices that may not necessarily be headline news, right? Like, to provide a space on our airwaves or on our websites that just profiles average people going about their daily lives and doing the work that they do is a really beautiful thing, especially in public media. Like, we are for the public. We are supposed to represent the people of Wisconsin. And, sometimes that representation comes in talk shows or in the news headlines, but the average person isn't going to make it to the top story of, Wisconsin Public Radio. And so the fact that we're able to provide a space, whether someone's being profiled or if someone just has something to say, like the people who write the essays, I think that that's a beautiful thing, because it's lending the airwaves to the people.
I think that that point is really sort of subtle and important. And I was just looking and can't find this poem that I recently heard, but it there's a line in there that stuck with me, and I keep thinking about while you're talking, and that is referencing that I had a very human day, and
Mm,
and there's just something so important in remembering that all of us are just going through our regular human days all the time. And that when we remember that, then it's also you get to remember that, and in that human day, people are super interesting. They're doing
mhm.
incredible things. They're having emotional moments. They're encountering each other in ways that have ripples throughout the world. But all of us are just having these human days. And when we get to hear the stories from them, yeah, you kind of you do feel more connected, whether it's, an idea that you hadn't thought of before, or you realize something's happening you didn't know was happening. But it's also just important to remember that we're all just, having our human days. But yeah, I think that both Love Wisconsin and Wisconsin Life celebrate the value of that, this sort of shared human experience.
Yeah, I think about like I just thought of two writers that I work with who are both freelancers, two very human humans in Wisconsin. One of them is Ron Weber. He is a forester with the DNR, actually. He lives up in Weyerhaeuser. And I've deemed him like our senior deer hunting correspondent because every year he sends a new deer hunting essay. And like he just has this beautiful way of writing about being one with nature, being in the woods, the things he's thinking about, the very human experience of deer hunting. But he's also sent essays on admiring like a particular tree or like loving the view out his kitchen window. And he's able to just write about it in this really relatable and beautiful way. Like, I did not grow up deer hunting. My family does not deer hunt. But when I read his stories and hear his stories, I get it more and I appreciate it more. Another writer that I think about is her name's Via Laura. She is based in Eau Claire. And lately she's written about a bit about grief because she lost her sister about a year or two ago. Um, but it's kind of like navigating grief or navigating life through these very just normal experiences. Like she wrote a story about teaching her niece how to wrap egg rolls and becoming like the fastest egg roller in the family. And just going through that process of like making a dish that's very important to her and her family and what all that entails. Like we look at things like cooking and food, we all have to eat, like how we eat is all very different though. And so, yeah, just being able to, like you said, highlight these people and give these people a platform, just talking about their normal human experiences is wonderful.
Well, this might be a weird tangent, but I will say, particularly being on this sort of self-appointed bagel quest that I'm on, people love to talk about their family food. Like,
Yes,
like
absolutely.
I've never had a better in with people. I was actually, I do these storytelling workshops in
Mhm.
some of the prisons. And so I was in Racine prison a couple weeks ago and I was like heading out to a bagel quest stop. So I was telling them about it. And they were like, well, I think a lot of them just never had a good bagel. So they're like, why are you so intense about bagels? So first of all, I explained what a good bagel was, but I also said like, what is the family food that if it's not made how you are used to being made, like you will not ever eat it. And like we couldn't stop, no one could stop talking. Like everyone had so much to say about like what should be in a chili or what should be in a tamale. Like it was so animated. So anyway, so I just think that yeah, this is a weird tangent. I mean, we are all very serious about the foods we grew up with, you know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We've done a project for a few years now. It's a joint project with PBS Wisconsin and Wisconsin Public Radio called Food Traditions. And so we'll pick like 5 or 6 dishes and go across the state and create radio pieces, video pieces, photo essays, just surrounding like a particular dish. And it's one of my favorite projects because I learn about dishes I haven't been familiar with, or you see a dish like lutefisk, which to me is like, oh gosh, lutefisk. But then you understand like the history behind it and like who loves it and how to actually like eat a good lutefisk, things like that. And so, yeah, I think like centering our human experience and our family history around food is just, it's so relatable. It makes it so relatable to other people too.
Yeah.
I watched one of those about the Oneida white corn
Oh,
because I
yeah.
was working on a story about it, and it's a good show. It's a good show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question, like I think like a very like Wisconsin specific question, and I apologize, I don't remember the name of it, but you have a segment you do where people just get to fully nerd out, and you're like what is the question you have
Oh,
about
yes.
Wisconsin? What's the title of that?
Wisconsin.
Why
So
Wisconsin?
that's where people can send in their questions and we answer it. You ask, we answer.
Yeah. So what's your favorite weird thing that you got to learn from these questions?
Okay. I'm trying to remember my favorite. I will tell you, well, okay, one of my favorites, which is also like the most popular article of all time on WPR.org, was the one about cannibal sandwiches. It's like it went global. So the cannibal sandwich, for people who aren't familiar, is straight up raw ground beef, probably raw onion on top, on like white bread or rye bread. There's like variations of it. I think maybe people put salt in the ground beef. So someone wrote into our Wisconsin project and said, like, what's the deal with cannibal sandwiches? So my former colleague, Mary Kate McCoy, she went to a butcher shop, I think in the Milwaukee area, that sold ground beef knowing that like people will buy it for cannibal sandwiches because like you have to be careful about the ground beef you're buying
Yeah,
for
I would
obvious
think so.
reasons.
Yeah.
It's got like the sushi of ground beef. And then she also talked with a chef, Justin Carlisle, who used to own Ardent in Milwaukee, because he made like a very fancy elevated version of the cannibal sandwich at his restaurant. And he was like a James Beard semifinalist, I want to say. Um, so she got into the history of it. She like talked with this butcher and with the chef about like their love and connection to it too. And it was so interesting to me, and clearly lots of other people, because there had been other stories about cannibal sandwiches out there, but I think she broke it down so well as far as like the history, the do's and don'ts, and why this is a thing. And I mean, people ask about it all the time still. It comes up all the time. I didn't remember this, but apparently my grandpa used to have it at family gatherings, but like nobody else ate it but him, and that's why I don't remember it.
Wow.
Um, yeah, but it's like I think some people call it like a funeral dish, so people will bring it to funerals,
Hmm.
um, church basements, things like that, holidays. Yeah.
Well, that's one of the coolest things about the kinds of jobs I think that we have is being able to follow these kinds of questions and go deep into them. So there's both the breadth of like kind of knowing a lot about a lot of things,
Yeah.
but also having exposure and then getting to like dig in, right? And one of the things that you did, based on your own interest and background coming out of lacrosse, was the project Uprooted.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, which was brought to light a piece of our state's history that I wasn't familiar with. And I'm sure that's the case for a lot of people. And also, evolved into multiple platforms beyond radio, podcast, website, exhibition. Do you want to talk about Uprooted a little bit?
Yeah, so Uprooted was as you said, it became an 8-part podcast. It was supposed to be a 4-minute Wisconsin life story. It blew up. So back in 1980, giving people a little bit of background, back in 1980, there was this one of the biggest global migrations in modern history. It was called the Mariel Boat Lift. It was this moment when Fidel Castro opened the gates of Cuba and said, if anyone wants to leave, you can leave, because before that it was difficult to leave. Um, what ended up happening was a lot of people who had family like in Florida, hopped a boat and reunited with family in Florida. But then what also happened was Castro used it as an opportunity to like let people from prisons and hospitals leave as well. So it ended up being, gosh, I think it was 125,000 Cubans left, and all showed up on the shores of Florida, Key West, Florida, in a span of like 2, 3 months. Like, that's an insane amount of people. So the government started sending different people to army bases, one of them being Fort McCoy in Sparta. And so some people were there for like a couple weeks because family would come get them. Some people were there for like over a year, and then had nowhere to go. Some people would go to bigger cities like Chicago or Minneapolis, but then there were people who didn't have ties to anywhere and just kind of stayed in the region. And back when I was a student at UW La Crosse, like I had learned this history and I had encountered like a few guys, especially in the music scene, who were part of this. They were some of the exiles that came over during that time, and me being like nosy and 20, I was just like, tell me about what happened. And they'd be like, I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk. But it always stuck with me. And so fast forward to 2020, it was the 40th anniversary of the boat lift and also the pandemic. And I was like, I want to revisit this. So I found a professor at UW La Crosse. His name's Omar Granados, who had been also working on collecting oral histories around this. He's also from Cuba, but he's younger. He moved to La Crosse and had no idea there were Mariel refugees there. And so we ended up teaming up again to do like a single Wisconsin life story. And then the second these guys started sharing their stories with me, I realized this is way more than 4 minutes, and everything I thought going into this is actually wrong. What I knew going into it too was like all the research I'd done, a lot of the newspaper articles I'd read over the years were very much from like the white local perspective. You rarely heard from the exiles themselves. And so that was really important to me to help center their story, but also talk with researchers, academics, people who have studied this moment in time, people who have studied, what was going on in Cuba at the time, and to really present a more full, complete story of this situation because it is huge and it's also a very imperfect story. Like a lot happened after people settled in La Crosse. Like, some of them have criminal records. They couldn't find jobs, so they may have turned to the drug trade. Some of them, went on to have like wonderful careers and building families. Like, there's no one story. So it was really important for us to provide the context of like what happened in Cuba, what was happening in the US with national politics, and then what happened with these men, because it was all men that we talked with, and their lives in Southwest Wisconsin. What was their life like after they settled here? Not knowing English, not understanding our system, not really having a lot of government support, and also facing, frankly, quite a bit of racism in the community. So I'm really proud of it. Again, we put out an 8-part podcast. We had shorter stories featured on Wisconsin Life on WPR. And in about 3 weeks, there's an animation coming out centering on the life of Ernesto Rodriguez. He's one of the exiles who I've gotten to know very well through this process. So in a couple weeks, there's going to be an animation airing through Wisconsin Life on PBS Wisconsin.
That's awesome. We'll put a link
Thanks.
in the show notes. Yeah, absolutely. But
that was kind of long-winded, but it's a really hard. It's even like explaining it takes forever.
Well, Maureen, we can't help but acknowledge that we're in the early stages of 2026, and there's still a lot of uncertainty around what all of us are going to be doing this year, right? Last year changed all of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it's out in the public perception. People know that things are changing. What do you want to say about where you see things going for yourself and for Wisconsin Life?
Yeah, so one of the things happening at Wisconsin Public Media is that TV and radio are going to come together. They're going to start working together more. We're lucky in Wisconsin Life that we've already been doing this for years. But my counterpart, Kelly Saran, from PBS Wisconsin, her and I have started talking about like how do we make this happen like more intentionally. And so we've already done something where we've gone out together as a TV and radio crew together to cover a story. We went and interviewed a woman who runs a company/organization called She Slangs Wood in Milwaukee. And it was really nice because it was the first time I've ever done a radio story with a TV crew there too. So we're trying to like experiment with things like that. If television's done a story, is there a way that radio can go and do a story that's similar, but maybe has a different angle to it? So it's just figuring out ways to take radio to the next step and because at the end of the day, it's the people featured in the stories that's what matters. But we just have to adjust as far as like how we're telling these stories.
Well, I'm just, when all these funding cuts were happening, I was just very happy to learn that Wisconsin Life made it through. So I guess knock on wood, like for now, but I'm really glad that you're still doing this work and that Wisconsin Life is still putting out those stories. And it was fun to get a chance to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. You're both amazing.
Oh
well.
we love working with you, Maureen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Well, that was such a fun conversation. We are thrilled to have gotten a chance to sit down with Maureen. And in the weeks since recording this episode, we learned that she is moving on to the NPR station out of Milwaukee. That is great news for Wisconsin, and we are so excited for Maureen.
Yeah, I'm excited to listen to what she's going to do there. And thanks for listening to this episode. And thanks so much to Chrissy Widmeyer for being our audio engineer. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode.